Yeah.
You're under arrest on suspicion of murder on the 10th of this month, November, in the Meadows.
Stand still. Stand still. I want you to raise your jacket up. Want to see if you've got anything. Turn round. Right. Walk towards me. Walk towards me. Stop.
Nottingham is a city known for its history and culture. But behind the scenes, a darker story has been unfolding. In recent years, drug gangs have brought violence to its streets, turning parts of the city into battlegrounds. One gang in particular, led by Tremaine McKenzie and Jezekiel Dennis, ran a drug operation that ended in bloodshed, fear, and eventually long prison sentences. Their group was heavily involved in selling cocaine and using weapons to protect their business. Things reached a breaking point in November 2021 when a man named Michael O'Connor was stabbed to death in a quiet residential street. This killing exposed far more than a personal feud. It pulled back the curtain on a gang willing to use deadly force to stay in control. In this story, we'll look at who these men were, how they built their drug empire, and how police worked to take them down. It's a story of greed, violence, and the damage caused when people choose crime over community. Tremaine McKenzie was well known to police long before the murder that would bring him to national attention. Living in Nottingham, he had been involved in drug dealing for years. He wasn't just selling small amounts on the street. McKenzie was at the top of a growing operation, moving large amounts of cocaine and making serious money. He was smart, organized, and dangerous. Police say he ran his gang like a business, but one built on violence and fear. By his side was Jezekiel Dennis, another key player in the group. Dennis helped keep the gang running smoothly, making sure drugs were delivered, debts were collected, and problems were dealt with quickly, sometimes with force. The pair didn't act alone. The gang was made up of more than a dozen men, each with their own role. Some were drivers, some acted as lookouts, and others delivered drugs or carried weapons. The group operated across Nottingham and beyond. They used safe houses to store cocaine, burner phones to arrange deals, and cars with hidden compartments to move drugs around. They took steps to stay out of sight, rotating vehicles, avoiding contact with known offenders, and using women or younger gang members to front deals in riskier areas. But their lifestyle told a different story. Photos shared on social media showed holidays abroad, designer clothes, champagne in clubs, and fast cars on quiet city streets. It wasn't hard to guess the money wasn't clean. Police would later say that the gang's flashy spending habits helped investigators confirm how deeply involved they were in drug dealing. Behind the Instagram posts and designer labels was a system held together by threats and violence. Anyone who crossed the gang, whether rival dealers, customers, or even former associates, risked serious harm. There were reports of beatings, intimidation, and retaliatory attacks, some of which never made the news. Their world was secretive, but like many gangs, greed and pride made them careless. Arguments over money and territory with other dealers created tension, and as police would later reveal, these tensions would eventually lead to murder. This wasn't a group of petty criminals. They were organized, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it took to keep control of their drug business. But while they thought they were untouchable, they didn't realize just how closely the police were watching. By late 2021, tensions in Nottingham's drug world were rising. Mackenzie's gang had made a name for themselves, but their growing success brought enemies. There were whispers of rival dealers encroaching on their patch, and trust within their own group was beginning to show cracks. Power, money, and status were all in play, and each man involved had something to lose. The man caught in the middle was Michael O'Connor, a 31-year-old from Alexandra Park. O'Connor wasn't part of Mackenzie's gang, but he had connections across Nottingham's drug scene. Some believed he was working with a competing group. Others said he was simply trying to broker peace between feuding factions. What's certain is that Mackenzie's gang saw him as a threat, and in their world, threats had to be dealt with quickly. On the evening of November 10th, 2021, O'Connor was called to Wilford Crescent West, a residential street in the Meadows. He believed he was helping settle a dispute. He brought no weapon, but it was a trap, an ambush planned down to the minute. As he arrived, a group of masked men emerged and attacked. Within moments, O'Connor was stabbed through the chest. The violence was fast and targeted. The men who struck him ran off almost immediately, leaving him bleeding on the ground. Despite the best efforts of emergency services, he was pronounced dead at the scene. He never stood a chance. The murder sent shockwaves through the community. The Meadows, while no stranger to crime, had never seen such a cold, calculated killing in broad daylight on a quiet street. Neighbours recalled the sirens, the flashing blue lights, and the helpless feeling of watching paramedics try to save a man already beyond help. It didn't take long for detectives to realise this wasn't a random street fight. The men who killed O'Connor weren't locals. They'd been brought in from Manchester and Birmingham, paid to carry out the hit. This was a gang sending a message, not just to O'Connor, but to anyone who might be thinking of crossing them. In the hours that followed, Nottingham's streets remained on edge. Tensions between rival groups simmered just beneath the surface, and police braced for further retaliation. Then, in a separate incident just minutes after the murder, Jessica Dennis was caught on CCTV trying to fire a gun at another man believed to be linked to a rival gang. The gun jammed. No one was shot. But the warning was loud and clear. This wasn't about personal beefs or petty arguments. This was a turf war, one with its own rules, its own economy, and its own body count. And Michael O'Connor, whether knowingly or not, had become part of it. What looked like one night of violence was in fact the climax of months of growing pressure between criminal groups fighting over power, profit, and survival. And that single act, a knife in the chest on a quiet residential street, would be the beginning of the end for Mackenzie's gang. Police had seen enough. They knew there was more going on beneath the surface. And now, with a man dead and CCTV linking the gang to an attempted shooting just streets away, the hunt was on. The murder of Michael O'Connor triggered one of Nottinghamshire Police's biggest investigations in recent years. Codenamed Operation Havsac, the inquiry would go far beyond a single stabbing. It would uncover a web of criminal activity, violent intimidation, and drug trafficking that had gone unchecked for far too long. From the beginning, detectives believed the attack had been planned. The level of coordination, using men from out of town, burner phones, and fake names, made it clear this wasn't a spontaneous street fight. So officers started from the ground up, piecing together evidence from mobile phone data, CCTV, vehicle tracking, and witness accounts. CCTV footage proved invaluable. Cameras across Nottingham captured the movements of key gang members and the hired attackers in the days leading up to the murder. One car, a black Toyota, was picked up travelling repeatedly between Birmingham and Nottingham, carrying members of the hit team. Detectives followed this trail and matched times, dates, and movements with call records and hotel bookings. Police also tapped into communications data. They discovered that Mackenzie and others were in near constant contact with their associates in the days before the murder. Phones were activated and deactivated within short windows, used only once or twice before being discarded. Messages were sent using encrypted apps and through public Wi-Fi to mask the source. They also traced hotel records. Rooms were booked under false names, often for only one night, But investigators managed to cross-reference these with CCTV of gang members checking in, often in groups, carrying bags or meeting other associates in the lobby. These seemingly small details helped build a broader picture of how the hit had been organized. Surveillance footage caught Jezekiel Dennis just minutes after the murder attempting to shoot a rival, another moment that helped police show that violence was not just a response, but part of a deliberate campaign to control territory. Over the following months, police carried out coordinated raids across Nottingham, Birmingham, and Manchester. They seized burner phones, clothing worn during the attack, cash, drugs, weapons, and encrypted devices. They also found Class A drugs being processed for street-level supply, clear proof of a large-scale drug operation running alongside the violence. Detectives built a timeline that mapped who gave orders, who carried them out, and who tried to clean up the mess. By the time the case reached the Crown Prosecution Service, they had enough evidence to charge Mackenzie, Dennis, and 12 others with offences including conspiracy to murder, drug trafficking, firearms offences, and money laundering. Police described Operation Havsac as a turning point, not just because of the number of convictions, but because of the level of cooperation and detail involved. The case showed how a patient, data-driven approach could bring down even the most secretive of criminal gangs. The arrests began quietly. Police moved in on key suspects across Nottingham, Birmingham, and Manchester, timing the raids to avoid any leaks or sudden disappearances. Within days, Tremaine Mackenzie, Jezekiel Dennis, and several other gang members were in custody. The rest were rounded up soon after. Each man was brought in for questioning, but most refused to talk. Many gave no-comment interviews, hoping silence would protect them. They denied knowing each other, denied being in Nottingham that night, denied everything. But the evidence told a different story, and it was piling up fast. The trial, held at Nottingham Crown Court, lasted over 4 months. It involved 14 defendants, each facing a range of serious charges: conspiracy to murder, firearms offences, drug supply, money laundering. Security at the court was tight, and the public gallery was often full, with families of both the defendants and the victim attending regularly. Prosecutors laid out the case methodically. They presented maps, call records, travel logs, and CCTV timelines that showed exactly where each man had been in the lead-up to the murder. Mobile phone data showed calls bouncing off masts in Nottingham, perfectly matching the movements of vehicles on camera. Hotel records, license plate recognition, and witness statements built a picture that left little room for doubt. Perhaps the most chilling evidence came from the group's planning. Jurors saw text messages, often written in code, arranging logistics and meeting points. There were messages referring to weapons, money, and locations, all backed up by surveillance footage and forensic links. Even the clothes worn during the attack were matched to those found in gang members' homes during raids. Throughout the trial, Mackenzie and Dennis tried to distance themselves from the planning. Their legal teams argued that others acted independently, that the pair had no role in organizing the killing. But the jury wasn't convinced. The structure of the gang, the leadership roles, and the digital footprint left behind told a different story. All 14 men were found guilty, some of murder, others of manslaughter, and the rest for their roles in the wider conspiracy. The verdict marked one of Nottingham's largest gangland convictions in recent memory. As the jury filed out, there was no emotion from Mackenzie or Dennis. But outside the courtroom, police officers spoke of relief, and the family of Michael O'Connor finally saw the men responsible held to account. In September 2024, the final chapter of the case was written in court as the 14 men were sentenced for their roles in the murder of Michael O'Connor and the wider criminal enterprise. The group received a combined total of more than 85 years in prison, bringing a sense of justice to a community left shaken by their actions. Tremaine Mackenzie, described by the judge as the gang's leader and decision-maker, was handed a 30-year sentence. The court heard how Mackenzie planned the ambush that led to O'Connor's death and used violence and threats to protect his drug empire. His close associate, Jessica Dennis, was jailed for 22 years. He was found guilty of manslaughter and firearm possession, with the court citing his role in the attempted shooting just minutes after the murder. The other members of the gang received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years, depending on their involvement in the attack or the drug network it was tied to. Some were convicted of manslaughter, others for assisting an offender, firearms offences, or conspiracy to supply Class A drugs. The judge did not mince words. He described the group as a dangerous and organised gang who showed no regard for human life. He added that the killing of Michael O'Connor was not just a murder but a message, a display of power in a battle for territory and control. The sentences, he said, had to reflect the seriousness of what took place that night and the broader harm the gang had done to the community. Police welcomed the result. Senior detectives from Nottinghamshire Police and the National Crime Agency said the case showed what could be achieved through persistence and cooperation. They noted that dismantling the gang had not only delivered justice for Michael O'Connor's family, but had also broken apart a network responsible for spreading fear and drugs across Nottingham and beyond. But for many watching, there's a sense that justice doesn't undo the damage. Michael O'Connor is still gone. Families have been devastated. Entire neighbourhoods were affected by the gang's violence and influence. Even with the gang behind bars, the question remains: how many others are ready to take their place? For now, Mackenzie, Dennis, and their associates will serve their time, stripped of the power they once held. But the problem they represented, of young men drawn into violent criminal life in pursuit of money and control, still hangs over cities like Nottingham.